Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining the New York City Tech Talent Draft virtual panel. I'm Justin Chena, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Before we start, I want to give a little bit of background. New York City Tech Talent Draft is an initiative of the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and they basically support the growing tech ecosystem here in New York City. They do a lot of great work, and you probably know that already. The key elements of the talent draft include events on campuses all around the Northeast, and then also events where they bring students into various different tech scene or tech companies here in New York City. In fact, they've done that here at Gust, which I'll describe in a second. And they also are part of other very, very cool initiatives, things like the Big Apps Civic Technology Competition, which is really fun. Various different initiatives for bringing you Wi-Fi across the city, and Digital.NYC, which is New York City's hub for tech and startups, and it's what I'm a part of, and I'll describe in a bit. They have all sorts of great resources, not only on their website, but through their social channels, and they will be, if they haven't already, they will be forwarding you many of these different resources after the panel. So check them out, NYC EDC, good partner. And now I will introduce myself. I'm Justin Chena, like I said, marketing director at Gust.com. Gust is the largest online platform and community for connecting entrepreneurs and early stage investors. So we're the largest in the world, and essentially we help you guys, or entrepreneurs, find the money that they need. A part of Gust is Digital.NYC, which, as I said, is New York City's official home for tech and startups. And it is a tremendous resource. It's www.digital.nyc. And it essentially has every single resource that you can imagine. It has every startup, or close to every startup, investor, class, job, resource, course, almost anything that you could think of is there. So it's a tremendously good resource to start if you're looking for anything in the city that has to do with tech or startups. And of course it has news, it does some curation of tweets, so it's a good place to start. That's me. I'll be moderating this evening. We have a great panel, and before I introduce everybody, just note that on the right-hand side of your screen is a blue icon, I believe, and it's the ability is a Q&A feature. So if you want to ask any questions, you can use that button at any time during this conversation, and we will get to the ones that we can. But feel free to reach out, because we want to be able to help. So without further ado, the really important people here are our panelists. I'm going to let them take it away, but first I'll introduce Emma Weisberg, founder and CEO of Blinkbuggy. Emma, do you want to describe a little bit about Blinkbuggy and yourself?
Yes, sure. Hi. So glad to be here tonight, so thanks for having me. Like Justin said, my name's Emma Weisberg, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Blinkbuggy. And Blinkbuggy is a very private, easy way to log your life, essentially. So we call it life logging. And we focus on privacy, and we also focus on children. So parents documenting their children's lives, really from birth through first steps, on through adulthood.
Yeah, it's funny because I've heard people talking about that and trying to do it through other channels, and it just doesn't work. So when I saw and read about Blinkbuggy, I was like, that's a fantastic idea.
Well, thank you.
So, what's that?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we also have here Helen Pan, Director of Finance and Partnerships at Bow and Drape.
Hi, happy to be here. Like Justin said, my name is Helen Pan, and I'm the Director of Finance and Partnerships at Bow and Drape. Bow and Drape is a fashion tech startup in New York City. Our customers can go on our website and customize their own women's apparel and accessories and pet sweatshirts. It's really fun. You can go and use our product configurator on our site. then all of our products are actually handmade to order in the USA. And our best seller is our classic sweatshirt with gold sequin lettering.
Nice. Also, when I read about Bow and Drape, I read that they were, or that you are, the Build-A-Bear of contemporary fashion. And I just pictured this very easy way of navigating across various different, fashion accessories. So it sounds great. Next, Dan Herman. He's CEO and co-founder of ChatID.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Thank you to the NYC EDC as well. So hi, everybody. So ChatID is the only chat provider today that lets brands chat directly with shoppers across different retail sites and stores where their products are sold. So I co-founded the company a few years ago with two of the leaders in the Jabber or XMPP community, which is the standard today that's powering chat across the largest messaging networks in the world, like Facebook Chat and Google Chat. And today, some of the largest retailers and brands in the world are now standardizing on ChatID as well. So thanks again, Justin.
That's cool. So I'm sure we'll find out more about that. I have some questions about it, but we'll get into it once we start. Next, we have Deepti Sharma Kapoor, who is the founder and CEO of FoodtoEat. Hi, Deepti.
Hi, just making sure I was unmuted. Hi guys, my name is Deepti. I started FoodtoEat. We're actually a concierge corporate catering service in which we help offices coordinate meals for meetings and events from the best local food trucks, restaurants, and traditional caterers. So we help a lot of companies build culture by providing perks and benefits through food, so keeping everyone well fed in New York City.
We need that, by the way. If I calculated the amount of time that I spend round trip just getting lunch, I'm sure I could do a lot of productive things.
Exactly.
So, right?
That's the of our companies.
So next we have Robert Estelle, CTO and co-founder at Preo.
Thanks. So as you said, I'm Robert Estelle. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Preo. We let people order and pay for food and drinks using their phone at bars, clubs, music venues, and stadiums. So if you can imagine, rather than waiting in line for concessions or trying to flag down a bartender, we let people just do that through an app while they're there, and they get an alert when it's ready, and we handle all the payment and ordering and progress notification of that. So we founded the company several years ago here in New York City, and this is where we're based.
What is your favorite place to potentially order from?
Oh,
now that
everywhere.
Now that we can do this.
Yeah, everywhere. I mean, that's the goal, is ubiquity. We're starting off with a lot of large concert venues and going to sports stadiums. I think that's where we make the highest impact initially.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking like a baseball game would be amazing.
Exactly.
Yes. So I would say it's like the Uber of food at a concert, but we don't want to say that association anymore, I guess.
Yeah. No, we're trustworthy.
All right. So So that's our panel. These are great people to give us some insight to some questions that we have prepared. But again, there is an opportunity to ask some questions. But I'm going to start with Dan. And Dan, I want to ask you about why we have a lot of people watching today. We have a lot of students watching today. It may be their first job. It may be their second job. Maybe one of their earliest jobs. And the question is, why would you recommend that they or techie of any kind work at a startup early in their career? Because it's a bit of a different landscape than a more established company.
Yeah, it's a great question. It really depends on who the individual is, but I can give you a few examples. I think that probably tells it best. So some of the leaders on our team today actually started with us, quite frankly, actually as interns while they were still in school, and including actually at least one that's left school to join us full time. And the feedback that we've gotten from these folks who are incredibly talented is that the amount that they learned in that short period of time working with the company was more than they learned, for instance, let's say in the first few years that they were in school, in terms of actual practical knowledge and things that they can apply, not just in this startup, but potentially even later on in their career. So, the things that you get at a startup that, let's say, you don't get at a big company, and there's certainly pros and cons to each, but it's a smaller team environment, right? So there's more responsibility to go around. So there's the opportunity for you to come in immediately, really take ownership over something, and actually have an impact and see the immediate impact of the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Whereas, potentially if you're in a bigger company, in a bigger environment, your work is getting averaged in with hundreds or thousands of other people, and you might not, that work that you're doing, who knows, it may never see the light of day. So that's probably the biggest thing. I think it's that opportunity to learn super quickly, be around people who you can really create something with, and that's a very special thing.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing. First thing you mentioned, the idea that some of the leaders in the company started as interns.
Yeah, I mean, we tried. Look, I mean, we like to say here that if you actually look at a company like Walmart today, right, and they're the biggest company in the world. They're Fortune 1. Their CEO actually started out as packing boxes, right? So we don't think it should be any different here. Quite frankly, someone who's an intern today could absolutely be CEO one day of ChatID. And so, I think a lot of that is environment, and it's creating those opportunities to learn. And quite frankly, if I was in that position coming out of school and thinking about what my first career move would be, the advice that I've always gotten is, you take into account three things, and you want at least two of the three. So you either need to be, ideally it's having fun, learning, and making good money. And if you have all three, then that's obviously great, but you want at least two out of the three. And I think there are a lot of startup opportunities out there, not just at ChatID, of course, but a lot of great companies in New York that I think create those opportunities.
Yeah. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Definitely at startups, you tend to have a wider breadth of responsibility just going in. Startups have fewer people, and they're trying to solve more fundamental problems to their business at that point. So not only do you have a breadth of problems that you need to work on, but they also tend to be more impactful on the company. So that's a very unique opportunity to startups that is hard to find, I think, in larger companies. Additionally, especially for people going to technology fields, startups tend to have a little bit more freedom to use newer technologies and things that are going to be transferable going forward. Whereas if you're going into a larger company, a lot of times you'll be working on an established product built with technologies that 5 or more years old that may be on their way out. And so depending on what your career goals are, that can have an impact on how valuable that knowledge is to you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just far more. I mean, from my experience, there's just far more complexity, or there's far more complexity in larger organizations, and it's much easier to introduce what would be considered innovations, in a smaller environment. What if you had to say, Helen? If you had to say the best part of being new in a startup environment, being this is your first opportunity, it's your first job, what is the best part of working in a startup?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one of the best things is kind of never knowing what to expect. So, I mean, certainly I have my set roles, and other people on my team have their set roles, but really that changes from day to day, right? So there might be something, that we need to do to drive sales for the holiday, knowing that we have an X number of days until our shipping deadlines, and then kind of everyone switches gears to work on that project, and I think that's really exciting. So kind of having your set tasks, but then having these, unpredictable opportunities to really learn and to experiment. I actually came from a much larger organization. I worked at an investment bank for the first 6 years of my career, and I was in a very kind of structured group in a very defined role, and I found my job to be very predictable. So I think as a young person, I think that working at a startup is amazing if you're looking for those opportunities and for those moments when you can really kind of take on any task and learn.
Yeah, I think there's benefits and drawbacks in what you talked about. There's so many people that respond well to the changing tasks. Your responsibilities could be the same every day, or they could be different every day. And I think that's exciting for some, and for others, it's actually potentially a drawback because they want some more structure. Emma, what do you think about the potential drawbacks, I'd say, or trade-offs, at a startup compared to working at a larger organization?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely startups are not for everyone, right? And that's also okay. Like, there are people who do really well in that environment where every day is completely different and you're almost creating a new job every morning when you walk in the door. And other people who really thrive, like you said, on structure, but also becoming, when you are at a larger organization, your role is very, very narrow and very clearly defined, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, but the good part of it is that you really do become an expert. You become an expert in something very specific, and that's a skill you can carry on and that people will look for and hire you for. In the startup environment, speaking on the drawback side of things, you are more of a jack of all trades. So you have incredible versatility, but you don't tend to go as deep into any one area. And having been at a large company for many, many years before this, I would also say that the large company provides sort of formal career development and formal trainings that you learn on the job at a startup like you would never anywhere else, but you don't have that kind of formal structure in place to make sure that you are taking all the right steps and moving from point A to B as you should.
Right. It is, and I mean, what we just described, I feel like you look at it and it's the entire spectrum. You have the opportunity to essentially go from intern to leadership quickly, but you also have what could be, in some cases, a less structured environment, which for some people is not as easy to manage. So Deepti, what do you think? Benefits and drawbacks? Do the benefits outweigh the drawbacks? How does this all play out?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel that. So I think I'm the only person that actually hasn't worked at a really big corporation before this. I worked on 4 different campaigns, political campaigns, and then worked at a political consulting firm that was, again, very small and was actually a startup firm that I had worked at. So for me, I think always being a part of a small team was very important, and which is why when I started my company, it was a natural fit for me because I was building a career for myself as opposed to a job. I was building a place that I wanted to be, a place that I wanted to wake up to every day and just, be happy to be there. Be at a place that I was able to challenge myself and challenge the people that were around me. And the great part about starting your own company is that you get to pick the people you work with. Because you're doing all the hiring. Although it is very hard when it comes to hiring, it's awesome that you get to interview people and just get to know them and bring on awesome people to build amazing products and services. So I definitely think that there's more benefits than drawbacks, and the structure part for some people is a little uncomfortable, but I think for someone like me, I think I love chaos, and chaos is my way of figuring out what to do next. So to me, I think there's only benefits in startups.
Well, there you have it from a team of biased people, because we are all in startups. No, you should join us. You should join our ranks. So before I go on to the next question, there's a bunch of questions coming in, and so I think I'm going to tackle a couple of these. I think it would be great to hear from all of you on this. So I'm going to start here. So many of the big tech companies tend to focus on highly structured technical interviews as a means of vetting potential employees. Do startups tend to use the whiteboard interview as their metric, or are they moving towards different skill level assessments? So it's really about, is the startup interview process different than the larger companies? Is it a little bit more open versus a little bit more structured? And we can start with Dan, and then we'll go to DT and.
Sure. Well, in terms of our interview process, it varies by, it certainly varies by position. I can tell you the qualities that we look for in our engineering staff is, number one, it's the ability to learn. So especially for someone who's just coming out of school, it's not necessarily what you know now or what you already know, although the more that you can show us that you've built stuff, that's great. That you've actually worked on interesting projects, let's say, outside of your normal curriculum. But we care a lot about your ability to learn, right? And so that aptitude. And I think as a signal to, the next big thing is really around self-motivation. The point about having built things outside of, let's say, your normal curriculum, we think that that's a great signal to that you're naturally curious and naturally motivated to learn new things. And the reason why that's so important in a startup environment is because of the points I think that the panel mentioned before, which is that the conditions do change on the ground, and so you have to be nimble. You have to be able to adapt, and so that's what you know today may not be relevant, let's say 12 or 18 months from now, or even less. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful, Justin.
No, I think so. I think it's interesting to identify a very, very critical central quality, which is the ability to learn quickly as a first job, because there are so many things that need to be learned. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But then also this concept of curiosity outside of the curriculum. That being said, I'm going to pass it on to Deepti. What do you think? How is it different in terms of the interview process?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think the number one thing is knowing about the company you're coming into. There are plenty of times where I think that when people are applying for internships or jobs, they just start kind of posting things everywhere, and sometimes this hasn't happened often to us, but lack of research or lack of understanding the product. Use the product, is I think number one for us. If you want to join a startup, I think that every startup wants to know that you think that their product is the best, right? I mean, it may not be the best at the time, but at least you're willing to make it better and you understand it. For us, I think one of the main things I look for, whether you're a tech person or not, is passion and leaving your ego at the door. So you may have been number one in your class, but when you come here, especially for us, there's no hierarchy. I may have been the founder or maybe holding a quote-unquote CEO position, but it means nothing. In here, we're all one, and I think that's, as there's a lot of students coming from the top universities, they're being challenged and they're being given awards. Here, you're going to be given an award once you do something and you prove yourself here. We're not going to, take what you've done in the past and say, okay, this person must be the most intelligent person. Everyone here is the same. So for us, it's passion, drive. And like said earlier, willingness to learn, I think, is extremely important, and that comes with dropping your ego that you don't know everything and that you will be learning on the job, and that willingness is extremely important to us as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so Emma, Deepti mentioned passion. I've heard this a lot before, and I agree. It's this hard to measure quality that typically means that somebody's going to be able to power through the hard times. But do you look for passion? If you do, how do you gauge that sort of thing? I mean, it's intangible in a way.
Absolutely. Passion, I personally find very challenging to figure out someone who's truly passionate about your project in one or two interviews. But what I think is easy to tell is whether you have a real sort of culture fit with them, right? So if the personal relationship is going to be a good, solid, strong one, is usually pretty easy to tell right off the bat. Like, would you be friends? Can you go get coffee? When you have a 3 or 4 person team, that's extremely important.
Yeah.
Everyone who's there really has to be someone you want to spend ridiculous amounts of time with. But I do think, sort of on the passion side, the way that we try to get at it is people can tell you that they care about your space or, you know, the vertical that you're in, and that's fine. But what's more interesting to me is really if they've already thought about what some of our challenges might be, especially from a technical perspective, and those are areas that they've worked in. So maybe they've never worked in our vertical, in our space, but they've tackled a similar technological challenge in work that they've done in the past, or you know, if you're a student, projects you've worked on, and can talk to me about how they would see that and how they would tackle that issue.
Yeah, it's a more practical approach, and when you have, well, there's 2 sides of that coin. So everybody, what Emma's saying is, yes, you're working with people. You know, you have to like them. They have to like you. In addition to really being able to solve problems. I'm going to transition the question from this because I think we're kind of going from this initial question of is it a more structured interview process versus is it a more whiteboard interview process to how, you know, what are the things we're looking for. And Jordanos asked, how do undergraduates get these internship positions where there is not a large application slate? In other words, is there different processes for how students would get startup intern positions compared to large tech companies? So I'll pass it on to Helen. Is there a difference, because typically startups will not have these larger sites, which actually I find kind of daunting. But is there a better way to find these jobs? Oh wait, let me plug digital.nyc. There's a little sticker. Digital.nyc. Lots of jobs there, but how? Yeah, I mean, aside from applying through potentially the places where you can find lots of them, how would you recommend finding it?
I mean, for us, so we do try to post on a variety of job boards, but for us, we really value the people who reach out to us directly. So, you know, it might be someone who is looking for a full internship, spring, summer, but they're emailing me directly, expressing their interest, their genuine interest in our company, kind of like showing their understanding of what we're trying to do, kind of what our challenges are, what we're missing, and then maybe being innovative, creative, and kind of proposing, you know, some of their own thoughts and some of their own ideas to really kind of show why they want to work at Bow and Drape. So our recruiting process can be, I guess, more formal. You can, reply to a job post that we post on a school job board, or it can be very informal in that, you know, you find my email somehow, or you message me on LinkedIn and try to, you know, initiate some sort of conversation with me to show that you're interested and why you're interested.
And you're open to all of that. You're open to somebody reaching out if they happen to find you. It sounds like as long as they have a unique view.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be bombarded,
Nah.
but if you're genuinely interested, you know, you can find any means to contact me, I would say.
Right. Okay. And so, Robert, what do you think what's the best way for students or newly graduating, to access startups versus, you know, the larger companies?
No, I totally agree with that. The way I actually got my first internship when I was still in college was emailing the CEO and just continuing to try to make my case and make sure that happened. Now that I'm kind of on the receiving end, I also appreciate that. I think it's a sign of drive if people will go out of their way to make contact as opposed to just filling out forms. As long as it's done well in a way that demonstrates your value and why you actually want to be part of Preo. It also, on my side, when people follow up that way, a lot of times it just makes my job easier. It can be a little bit easier for me if someone is obviously interested and obviously putting effort into making sure that we pay attention to them. again, subject to certain kinds of social norms there, but
Yeah.
I think reaching out directly, especially within startups, is probably more frequently the way to go than in a lot of other situations.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and I think it's being this concept of being proactive, the concept of being smart in your approach. Really, I mean, absolutely making sure that you've gone through the product in one way, shape, or form, and have a clear understanding of what it is and what potentially the challenges are. And the other thing is not giving up when maybe one or two or three or four don't work out. It's absolutely perseverance, just like any other aspect of the job would be. So that's my input. But I'm going to actually bounce to another question that we got from Max Werther that says, if I'm a non-technical student, but I'm extremely passionate about startups, where am I a biggest asset to the startup or technology company? How should I present myself in an interview? And what advantages do I have over technical people? Robert, you just want to continue there, and then I'll bounce around?
Yeah, so I think actually one thing about our company, Preo, is kind of unique in that we do a fairly broad number of things, including partnerships with actual brick-and-mortar venues and events and marketing and business development and things like that on a human level. I think that for non-technical positions, people who can show that they are problem solvers, regardless of whatever medium they're using, that they can solve problems, that they can identify problems, and they can figure out how to be valuable to the company or the mission. I think that is probably the most valuable general skill, and just making sure that you can demonstrate that and present that. That coupled with sort of the driving grit is important.
Right. Okay. So Dan, I'm going to bounce to you. What advantages do non-technical prospects have over technical people?
Yeah, Justin, I don't know if, well, it's hard to say advantages, right? I think it's, what I would go back to is we're hiring across the board, and I think a lot of companies are hiring across the board. So, it starts with building a great product and certainly building something that customers want, whether that's an end user consumer or whether that's an enterprise customer. But someone has to sell that product, someone has to service that product, right? Someone needs to market that product. So there are a tremendous amount of opportunities in a startup beyond just engineering positions, although engineering and product is of course incredibly important, and certainly at the foundation of our company. So in terms of I think the second part of the question here was presenting yourself in an interview. It starts before the interview. So I was actually talking with one of our investors today, and he actually came in for a lunch and learn, and the advice that he shared actually for folks who are even in the company today: do the job that you want, right? So do the job that you have signed up for well, but also with any extra time that you have left over, reach for what it is that you want. And so I think the way that applies to someone who isn't already working at the company, if you're applying, let's say, for a sales or a business development role, we're going to be evaluating how you reach out to us, let's say, presuming that you don't necessarily already have that track record and you're just coming out of school. We're going to look at how did you reach out to us, right? Were you creative in how you sourced us, let's say, as an opportunity? Were you thoughtful in personalizing your note? Because these are the things that we want to see in terms of how you'd be reaching out to our customers or prospective customers. So put in the effort. I know even if it takes an extra 5 minutes, use an app. I'll plug for an app. I've got nothing to gain, no stake in this company, but there's an amazing app and site out there called Refresh. I think it's refresh.io that puts together like dossiers on whichever person it is that you're interested in learning about. And so that's an incredibly valuable tool. I bet if you plug in Justin's name or anyone's name here, then you'll find some interesting tidbits, probably some scary amount of information, and use that without being creepy, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. Good tip. Yeah, I mean, businesses are businesses, they have business aspects of them. They have business development, they have marketing, they have operations. Everybody here, everybody in this panel is a founder or a CEO or a CTO or a director of some I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't have technical aspects to the job, but they are managing various different aspects of the operation, and that's. I mean, I'm the director of marketing. The marketing effort is a non-technical discipline, so there's plenty of things that you could do.
And just one last thing on that, like I think that it's really important to know that one can't work without the other. That's how, like, just like you guys have been talking, like tech people cannot work without sales, and like vice versa. Everything goes hand in hand, and it's really important. So every company needs everyone. It's not just that tech people are the only, way to start a company. There are companies that were started without technology. So I think it's important to just understand that, like, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, we all work together. The technical side is a big part of the equation, but it's just one part of the equation. So another question that I have here from Luke Maringer is, what is the biggest technical challenge that startups face? Is it user experience, market research, back-end scalability? What should a CS major learn to make himself immediately useful? And it sounds like this is specifically from the technical side. And I feel like this is going to be different for different people because everybody's got a sort of a different technical back end. But is there any way to generalize? I could start with Helen here.
Yeah, well, actually, our CTO built or is our front-end engineer and our back-end engineer. So I would say that being very flexible and kind of having a wide skill set is very important. Also, our site is completely custom, so everything is custom built. So I would, I guess, suggest being as creative as possible, as flexible as possible, kind of understanding that the technology that you build needs to scale with the business. So not kind of relying on these one-off solutions to solve problems in the moment, but really having that vision to see where the company is headed and where the company will be in a few years, so that the building blocks that you put together today will be relevant and will be usable as the company grows.
Yep. Robert, what do you think as the CTO at Preo? What is the biggest technical challenge? Is there something that a young CS major should really focus on?
I really do think that being knowledgeable of a very wide number of things is your best bet early on. With startups in particular, they, depending on the stage of the startup, they will typically need to develop and iterate on features very, very quickly. But at the same time, if they're going to be growing very quickly, you have to keep track of that technical debt. So finding that balance between making something right and making something is kind of, I think, a learned skill. But I think the best way to approach it is to be comfortable in lots of domains so that you can kind of forecast the consequences of your technical decisions to the best of your ability.
Yeah, so it sounds like the general problem solving. Is there anybody here on the panel that would say you really need to know X technology?
I would say it certainly depends on the position. I mean, and it depends on what stage of the company you're joining. So the earlier the stage, I would say, that probably lends itself to generalists better. The later the stage, as the company is starting to maybe do things that require more specialization, it really varies. Like, at our stage, so gosh, we're hiring specifically now. It might have been full stack at the very beginning. Now it's folks who are specifically focused on like interoperability and back-end integrations with chat systems, right? Specialists that are focused on building out front-end interfaces and different tools across various platforms, whether that's mobile, desktop, or web. Data scientists, things like that. So it really depends. I would say if there's a particular area that you're more passionate about and you're going deep, well, if you can be the best at something, it's probably one of the two, right? Be the best at a particular area, and then you're really useful, let's say, to a company immediately that's looking to solve problems specifically in that area. It could be data science, it could be machine learning, whatever. Otherwise, I think to Robert and Helen's point, probably the generalist approach is a safer bet if you're just looking to get your foot in the door at a startup as an engineer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I have to say that is how we hire, but we are a Rails shop. So if you come in and you're a wizard, that's going to be a benefit. That being said, look into, if you're passionate about a company, look into what their technology might be, or their stack, and if it's something that you really are gunning for that company, it could be something that you start to develop skills in. Again, I don't know that it means throw out all of the other potential languages or skills that you might be learning, but it would mean that you would have some fluency in something that you know is going to be core to your position.
Yeah, Justin, I think to your point, it goes back to that ability to learn as well, and being able to demonstrate that. So even if you're coming into, let's say, a company that their stack is Rails, and you happen to have been building product using different technologies in the past. Well, if you're fundamentally an exceptional engineer and you can demonstrate that and your ability to learn and adapt quickly, then that makes all the difference, right? And I think any company would certainly love to, any startup would certainly love to have you on their team.
Yep, yeah, and that does go here. We've hired plenty of people that have no experience in Rails, and we experiment with different technologies all the time. All right, so that's good. It sounds like nobody's saying specific skill sets, so I'm just going to move on, or specific technology, so to speak, or language. Seth Rosenbauer is asking, he's got several startup ideas of his own. He'd love to turn something into a company. So what was one thing early in the founding of your company that you learned or found helpful that you would suggest to entrepreneurs wanting to start a company? This is like, what's that one thing that you would say? I think everybody should answer this. So I'm going to just start. I'm going to start with Dan.
Oh, you had to pick me first for this one.
I did.
The list is just way too long to cover in the next 17 minutes. And those are all the stupid mistakes. I don't know. I guess if there was one, gosh, well, in our case specifically, I think focus was a big one. So, and really breaking the problem down to its atomic unit. So what is it that you're trying to validate, right? Like a startup, your goal is to validate that you are solving a problem that customers value fundamentally, right? That you've built something that they actually want. So, come up with whatever that plan is to, as far as how you're going to validate it. Don't fall too much in love with your idea, because if you're building something that no one wants, then, well, it's worse for you to spend 5 years of your life toiling away at that, only to find that there's no market for it, than to just kind of scrap it, deal with the pain right then and there, and go on and work on something new. The world would like you to work on something new at that point. So, yeah, I think we said one thing, so I'll shut up there.
So, focus. All right. So, Deepti.
Well, I feel like he took my answer away, but with what you just said, Dan, I think while you're trying to figure out the problem, for us what was important was talking to our potential customers. We're actually a company that pivoted. We started as a company that was purely an online ordering platform for food trucks, and what we found was, we did have a market, it didn't exist. We were creating a market, but it was a difficult one. And the more and more we started talking to our customers, which were the food trucks, we realized that they were just a very difficult business to work with. And for them, instead of just wanting individual orders, they wanted larger orders, which is then why we started focusing on corporate catering. So talking to your customers is extremely important. Just because you think it's a problem doesn't mean that it's going to work. So, we pivoted from one thing to another. We still work with the same kinds of vendors, but we changed our business as in how we're bringing them customers, not just individuals, but corporations. So do your research and talk to your customers, or your potential customers that, that you're trying to sell to.
I might need to come back to that, but I want to get through. I want to make sure we get everybody's lesson, because absolutely you have to talk to your customers, but there's nuances to that. But I'm going to move on to Emma. Emma, focus and
yes. Focus and talk to your customers. Love both of those. I would say really early on at the idea stage, the number one thing to do is to talk to everyone who will listen about your idea. So I often meet people get a little caught up in the fear, I guess, of if I talk to people, then they're going to take my idea, when really executing on an idea is so much work. It's very unlikely that someone's going to just run out and be able to do it themselves quickly. And also probably 10 other people are working on the same thing at the same time anyway. And when you don't talk to people, you really just don't get the feedback that you need to have before you put the real investment into, into building the business. And every conversation, in my experience, every single time that I've opened up and talked to anybody, there's something positive that comes out of that conversation, whether it's validation for your idea or, the opposite. A connection, a great idea that you hadn't thought of. So I'd really say just talk to everybody.
That is such a good note. There's so many times when people are afraid, and execution is a completely different animal than the ideation. How many people have a great idea and it just never gets done? It's a big thing. And maybe I'll say a little bit about that at the end, but I'm going to move on to Helen. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not a founder myself, but I certainly work very closely with the founders of Drape and have talked to other founders, and so I would say really to test like before you launch, because once you launch your idea and it's out there in the public, it's really hard to pause and kind of fill in the gaps that might be missing that you might have forgotten about. So, for us, for being a consumer tech company, you need really comprehensive inventory management systems, forecasting systems, customer service needs to be integrated. So kind of like, once you launch your site and it's out there and you don't have those things, it's very hard to kind of, stop the order flow and integrate those things into your website. So I guess my advice would be really just to take all the time you need, if you can, before your product goes live, to kind of hammer out all the issues, the kinks, the gaps, because that's really when you have the time to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because in order to test, you have to have some form of hypothesis of some kind. So what you're doing is your form of a hypothesis, and if it doesn't work, hopefully it does, but if it doesn't, it's not for some reason, figuring out what those various different elements of the idea are is important. And sometimes that's hard to isolate, but it is. It's important to frame it that way in your mind. So Robert, what do you think? We've got focusing, talking to customers, talking to people, and testing.
Yeah, I think especially at the very, very beginning phases when you want to start a company, it's all about who you surround yourself with, both in terms of potentially finding co-founders, but also other friends or potential team members. You need people who can both complement you in terms of your skill set, but also share your vision and finally be able to challenge you so that you don't. You want people who can tell you when you're wrong or when you're missing something or whether you're not thinking about something quite right. There's so many things to think about when you're starting a startup that you are probably usually mistaken the first time that you think of something. So it's important, I think, to find people that can help fill those gaps and push things forward with you.
Yeah. Don't. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Robert. I'll just add one more thing to that, and this is kind of an offshoot of Emma's comment as well. Never stop recruiting. even if you're not hiring, let's say, or not in a position to hire right now, never stop recruiting. So make those connections, identify people, have in the back of your mind, wow, when you meet someone exceptional, make a note of that. Wow, you'll know whether you want to work with that person and whether you'd want to hire that person. Keep in touch, build that relationship, because as your company starts to grow, you're not, and you kind of get to that point where, quote, you can't hire fast enough. Those are the first people that you'll probably be calling on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I mean, again, to sort of reiterate the distinction, I think, between a shared vision and being able to challenge each other. You need both in everybody that you're surrounding yourself with, I think, for a startup. But I really do think that that's critical to continuing forward on the right path with everybody that you bring onto your team.
Yeah, and I think it's a good, people. I mean, people are the stuff that gets stuff done. I mean, it's us that actually make things happen. So never underestimate the team. But Robert, you also said something about just the validation or the testing of your own ideas. And God, you have to be okay with being wrong on occasion. And it happens all the time for me. But if I wasn't willing to admit it, then I probably wouldn't be learning at the rate that we can. So don't be afraid to be wrong. And I think that's sometimes hard. For me, I think when I think about startups, because I've been in startups my entire life, the one thing I've learned, or one of the biggest things that I learned, is that they're hard. They're hard work. So almost everything is attractive from the outside looking in, but in the startup scenario, it's especially hard, and it means that you're going to be doing things that are not glorious. In many cases, they're repetitive, or they're hard, or they're not as elevated as you think they might be. But that's what you have to do in many cases to get these things done, and it takes a long time. I mean, it could take years. So it often does. There are some success stories out there, but just be prepared for what is a very, it's a difficult thing to do. So that's my 2 cents. But that wraps up that. I'm actually gonna continue to just answer these questions. I'm gonna completely veer away from the questions that we had before. Alex is asking, what's the best way for, and we've talked about the skill sets. So we've talked about, being able to solve problems. But Alex is asking, is there any specific way for somebody to potentially showcase their skills to get attention? Standard is resume and cover letter. Is there anything else that anybody can do or show to really make an impression? And I can start now with Emma.
Yeah, I think this would actually be similar to what I was talking about before when I was saying think about my challenges and come to me with some suggestions, some creative suggestions around how we could potentially, even if you're not in my code base, okay? You don't know exactly how we're handling things, but you could get a pretty good sense from playing around with the product. You can see, your biggest challenge for us, something in, photo management or content privacy, and come to me with some suggestions or other things you've seen in this space, other people who are using, who have similar challenges, and interesting and creative ways that they're solving those challenges. And that's a huge value add, and also shows that you thought through, the contact and reaching out to me. You understand our product, and you could obviously continue to bring, new and creative solutions to the table.
Yeah. And don't be afraid. I mean, the ideas, these are ideas, and they're for a company that you want to work for. In the best case scenario, they say, wow, this person really thought it through. In the worst case scenario, it wasn't an exact fit. But I mean, it's no loss to you. It's if whatever it is, it's an hour or two of your time, and you get to think through it. Anybody else have any input on that? I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but is there any specific thing that somebody could do to get themselves highlighted in the process?
Yeah, Justin, I think it depends on the role. So, if you're an engineer, build cool stuff, and we love that, right? That's probably the best showcase of what you're capable of. If you're a designer, show us your portfolio. We've gotten some really creative even resumes over over the last few years, which always catch our attention as opposed to something that's just plain and standard. So build stuff, and quite frankly, even if you were applying for a non-engineering or product type of position, build stuff could. What it really boils down to is demonstrate demonstrate your abilities and demonstrate your skills, and that could be if you're a business development, if you're applying for a business development or sales position, or an operations position, and you're in school, show us, hey, organize this great event that was a big success that raised this much money. We sold this much product, or raised this much money from donors. So the more that you can show that, apply that practical, the practical application of your skills, the better, because those are exactly the type of things that you'll need to do starting day one at one of these companies.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, to have something to show, to build, to do is highly valued. We have about 4 minutes, and I do want to ask this question, and just so everybody knows, again, if you have any questions about where to find jobs or anything in the tech and startup space in New York City, do check out digital.nyc. That was a couple of the questions. But this one's a little bit different. It's asking, what avenues did you guys use to find your best employees and or co-founders? Where did co-founder is particularly hard, I mean, but also it's often very natural. What are the best avenues for people to find employees? And we could do a little free form here, given we have about 3 more minutes.
I think networking is very important. It's fairly easy to do, especially in New York City. I'm going to meetups and things like that and talking about things that you are working on or building or interested in. I and I know many other people in startups value personal referrals very, very highly, both sort of as a character reference, but also as a sort of distilled resume of what this person is working on or interested in. I go out to meetups occasionally specifically for that reason, just to see who else is out there, who's where are people sort of in their job search, or what are they working on, or what are they interested in. I think that's a pretty easy way to get your name out there if you're looking for opportunities, and specifically have an idea of what kinds of opportunities you're looking for. So I think networking is very important.
Yeah, and that takes into account the idea of not being afraid to talk to people about what you're up to or what you're thinking. Let's see. Dan, you're a co-founder. Where did you guys find each other?
Sorry, Justin, that was for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, it's not going to come as a surprise. I've kind of been beating this horse throughout the evening. But my co-founder, so I have 2 co-founders. They built stuff together. They were building stuff together in the open source community for 6 or 7 years prior to us starting this company, and we met each other through a mutual contact in the open source community. One of the kind of fun facts in the company's history is that we were actually on 3 different continents before the company was started. And New York, it's an amazing place. It was actually kind of one of the elements that I'd say certainly was the nexus that brought us together, let's say geographically. But yeah, build stuff. You'll be surprised, and engage other people as you're building stuff. You'll be surprised who you meet, and hey, it's an opportunity to get experience working with that person before you jump into bed together. So build stuff. That's can't say it enough.
Yeah, I know how painful networking can feel sometimes, but it's a great way to meet new people. Set yourself a little goal. You go out. You're gonna say you're gonna meet 2 people. Some people are total whizzes at this, and it's totally easy. Some people are not. but don't be afraid to talk to people. Guys, that is time. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything before we wrap up, but you guys have been awesome and insightful. Hopefully everybody appreciates that. Any final statements?
Yeah, just want to thank the NYC EDC as well, again, for the for hosting this. And Justin, thank you for being a fantastic moderator. And then finally, a shameless plug. We are hiring across all positions, so go to our website. You can see a few of the positions that are open. They're not actually all on there, but that's chatid.com. And feel free to send us an email, careers@chatid.com. My personal email is dan@chatid.com. So thank you, everybody, for joining.
Any other plugs? Any other?
Oh, we at Preo are hiring too. So, Robert at Preo.com. Send us an email. We're specifically working for and engineering interns as well as salespeople going down the line. And thank you so much again. This was fantastically moderated.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you, NYC.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.